Go ahead.
Good evening. My name is Marjorie Gans, and I'm a member of the board of the Writers' Room of Boston. And I'm delighted that you could join us this evening for our new interview series, The Writers' Room After Hours. In this series, we'll be interviewing authors and others whose work is in some way related to writing and the arts. And for anyone new to us, the Writers' Room of Boston is a co-working space in downtown Boston, and it's for any and all writers, whether you're established and published or just emerging, who want or need a quiet place to write. The room is open 24 hours a day. It provides desks and silence and the quiet companionship of other writers. We've been serving the writers of the greater Boston area since 1993. During and since the pandemic, the room has been offering online resources, starting with our monthly reading series, and now including an online craft writing workshop and this new interview series. Excuse me. We inaugurated this series in January 2023 with an author interview, and we'll continue every other month with an interview with an expert about some aspect of writing, publishing, including, for instance, discussion about agents and submission opportunities, online publishing, translating, and we'll ask the questions that we hope writers are wondering about, and we will also have room for audience questions as well. So if, as you listen, you're curious or you have any questions about the room and its programs, please contact us on our website, writersroomofboston.org, and check out our Facebook and Instagram posts at Writers of Boston. Our website has photos, announcements, as well as information on how to join the room. You can also there find recordings of past readings from the room. We'd be delighted to have new members. We have different levels of membership, including a virtual membership for those who can't easily make it downtown to the room. And if you're interested, again, please check out the website, writersroomofboston.org. This series is made possible by grants from the Mass Cultural Council and Boston Cultural Council, and we also rely on friends. So if you enjoy this program, please consider making a contribution by using the donate button on the website. Also, we will be recording this interview and a replay will be available on the website. Tonight, we are talking with Rob Block, Leonardo Audio's production and education coordinator, and an audiobook narrator, Chris Ciulla. First, about Leonardo Audio production. Leonardo Audio has been producing quality audiobooks and interactive gaming audio since 2013. In 2021, the CEO, Chris Ciulla, who we have with us tonight, made the decision to enter Leonardo Audio into the audio publishing realm. The company is currently developing regional imprints in multiple markets, including New Jersey, New England, Florida, and California, in order to develop both local narration talent and engineering post-production teams to best support a pipeline of regional audiobook titles. Second, with over 20 years experience in major entertainment markets, Chris is extremely knowledgeable in developing screenplay and teleplay scripts for pitches to agents, studios, and networks, and eventual packaging. Through the strategic use of audiobook production, Leonardo Audio currently assists high market intellectual property in achieving the multimedia endgame of being greenlit for television and film production and/or streaming distribution. So that's Leonardo Audio. Of our two guests, one is Rob Block, and he is Leonardo Audio's production and education coordinator and an audiobook narrator. He's also author of the Sven Carter series of middle grade novels published by Simon & Schuster, and Off Strategy, a romantic comedy published by Leonardo Audio. When not working on his next middle grade novel, Rob is in pre-production on his first independent film set to shoot this summer. Rob is also happy to hear from fellow authors and book lovers in general, and you can reach him at rob.leonardoaudio@gmail.com. Chris Ciulla has narrated approximately 450 titles in his audiobook career. And just this year, he received 2 Audie nominations for Best Thriller, Snowstorm in August and Best Multicast, Star Trek, No Man's Land. He's received parts of 6 Earphones Awards from Audiophile Magazine, a 2022 Sovas nomination for Best Mystery, No One Will Miss Her, and an Odyssey Award, Sadie. Chris is also a TV and film actor with credits in shows at Castle and Gotham. He has mentioned that he dies very well. Is a frequent video game voice actor with over 30 characters in the Fallout game series for Bethesda, and he can be heard voicing the ultimate history quiz on your nearest Alexa device for the History Channel A&E. Rob and Chris will be talking together about their webinar titled Audiobook Publishing and Production, A New Chapter. They will cover how audiobook production and publishing work and the best way for authors to create successful audio versions of their books. Among the questions they will answer are, what is audiobook publishing versus audiobook production? How do I bring my audiobook to market? What are the different distribution options? How do I find audiobook narration talent and post-production services? How does the talent get paid? And what are the things I can do as an author to best prepare for the audio production? And what does an audiobook cost? As we go along this evening, please feel free to use the question and answer feature at the bottom of the screen. You can type in your questions and we will make sure to have time for discussion in the end. And now, Chris and Rob, take it away.
Thanks, Marjorie. Thank you, Leslie, in the background somewhere. We appreciate you and the Writers' Room of Boston having us. Yes, we are Leonardo Audio. Myself, Chris Ciulla, CEO, and Rob Vlock is our production coordinator and our education coordinator as well. What brings me tonight to you? I'm going to be very brief in my little story because this is a Boston group. And I'm a Boston guy who, for Boston reasons, has developed this company. I am an Everett High School graduate and a Boston College graduate. And then I went into politics for a little bit and didn't like it. I didn't end up enjoying it. And I was a performer at the same time. And being a performer and a congressional aide, they didn't match. So it ended up I moved to LA as a performer after doing about 4 years of sketch comedy in the Boston area. Moved to LA, was in LA for approximately 15 years. And since then have been in the New York, New Jersey area. But while I was in LA, I worked in all different aspects of performance, on-camera commercial, television, film. I became a writer and was pitching teleplays and writing scripts. And we were shooting a lot of stuff with friends and trying to become an auteur. And at a certain point in time, I developed a film history show that almost got on television twice and was represented by some of the largest agencies in LA. But how do we get to audiobooks? So I was walking in a Barnes and Noble in Woodland Hills, California, and I saw these cylindrical, these square plastic things on the bookshelves. And I said, those aren't books. What are these things? And I grab one, and it's a John Grisham novel. And I flip it over, and it says read by Michael Beck. And I'm like, Michael Beck was in The Warriors. He was Swan in The Warriors, the Walter Hill classic, that gang film from New York. And he was in Xanadu with Olivia Newton-John, R.I.P. What is he doing now? So besides booking a few TV shows in the 80s and 90s, he became an audiobook narrator, and that is his life. So his performance life, I should say. So fast forward 2 more years, I see another seminar about audiobooks being constructed by a gentleman by the name of Mark Cashman, and he brought in someone from Random House. It wasn't Penguin Random House yet, just Random House. Learned a little bit, but things still didn't click yet. About a year later, I finally was like, okay, I need another avenue of performance revenue to take care of the commercial years that aren't doing well. commercially, I wasn't making enough money. So I said, let's try this audiobook thing. And then you blink, and now we're 450 books into a career. And we have developed not only a production company, which is for people who are as prolific as I am, that's the natural tendency. Once you develop post-production teams underneath you, and you've developed more and more responsibilities as far as for on the production side, you become a producer. But I am in this for the long game. I am someone who has a creative mind and wanted to be an auteur at one time, and wanted to be a director. So you want more creative control. So that's why we've become a publishing company. And Leonardo Audio is a publishing company based in Boston. The idea is later on, once we develop our Boston imprint, and have our New England imprint do very well, then if it's a proof of concept that we can take this type of company and pretty much bring it anywhere in the country. However, we want this imprint to be our imprint, to be the one that does everything that New England needs as far as for our authors and as far as for our audio that we're creating. So essentially, this company, we want this company to be is for all of our Boston-based and New England-based stories, and our Boston-based and New England-based authors. And that's not always the same. You know, it's in that diagram, a lot of it is crossover, but some of it isn't. We want to be the company that you come to create your audio. That's what we want. So that's the quick presentation. Rob, you just mentioned, and Rob, I've been very lucky to have Rob be a part of this company because he is an author, who is someone who has been published by a Big Five company, by Simon & Schuster. So he brings a wonderful amount of information, knowledge, industry knowledge, and talent. But Rob had the idea to become an audiobook narrator. So Rob, why don't you tell a little bit about your journey?
Yeah, my journey is a little different. So I started out as an author. I've been writing for some years, have a couple of books with Simon & Schuster. I also made a detour into screenwriting for a while. My first ever novel was optioned by Sony, and I was hired to adapt. Ultimately, it died the death of 1,000 cuts in development. But it took many years after that, years of working as a copywriter and creative director before I got back into writing novels. I wrote my middle grade novels, the Sven Carter series, and I was going to a lot of school visits to talk to kids about writing and about creativity and about how awesome books are. And I was reading a lot out loud to the kids. And I realized how much I enjoyed storytelling, not only as a writer, but as a performer. And it was very serendipitous. My sister forwarded an email to me that was advertising a class that Chris was teaching for audiobook narration. And I said, I think I'll sit in on that. And after the first night, I started building my booth. I was so excited about the idea of becoming an audiobook narrator. This wasn't that long ago. But it has been so interesting seeing both sides of the business, seeing it from an author's perspective and from a narrator's perspective. And it's fascinating. There was so much I didn't know as an author about what goes into creating an audiobook. And that's one of the reasons we're here tonight, to talk about that so you all understand. Those of you who are authors in the room, I recognize a few names. We have a couple of narrators sitting in as well. So hi to our friends. But so that you who are authors understand what the process is to transform your written book into an audiobook. And even if you have published a book and it's become an audiobook, we can still give you a little more insight into how that happened. Sometimes I think when you're an author, it feels like that book transforms into a chrysalis and then emerges as an audiobook. We know what's going on inside the chrysalis. So that's why we're here.
Very
Chris?
good. Yeah, and just so everyone knows, I am the resident audiobook coach for Boston Casting, which is, the not only the largest casting agency for film and TV and commercial in the New England area, but they're also have the largest educational arm. So for all of those disciplines that you may be interested in on the performance side, they usually have a class. But I've been teaching for them for almost 4 years. I've been their audiobook coach, so that's been a nice ride. So let's get to the audiobook stuff, shall we? So
We shall.
so when it comes to audiobook, let's start with production. Okay. Audiobook production basically has a few different phases in it. And each audiobook that we have is gonna have these phases. One is formatting. You're gonna decide whether or not this audiobook is gonna be a single narrator, or whether or not it's gonna be a dual narration situation, a duet narration situation, or a multicast situation. So those are the 4 different types essentially of audiobook formatting that we have nowadays. Single narrator is simply we're casting one narrator for the entire book, and they are handling non-fic or fic. They're handling all the narration responsibility within that. If it is fiction, they handle all of the characters within it, including the narrator. They handle everything. If it is nonfiction, they're handling everything under that umbrella of that book and of that audiobook. So that one narrator reads it all, narrates it all, performs it all. In a dual DUAL narrator situation, this happens a lot in romance, where we have different POVs. We have a male POV and a female POV in a typical romance novel. In a dual situation, the male will handle the male POV and all the responsibility within that, all the characters within that. The female, chapter 2, will handle all the responsibility under that POV. They will have to communicate about the backgrounds of the characters and how the characters are going to sound during their prep while they prep for that audiobook. So it will have to sound like those characters exist in the same world. But they're handling their own responsibilities. They're not narrating together per se. So that's a dual. A duet is when these two narrators, in theory, are working together on the same day. They are working on something like Discord or Zoom, where they're communicating with each other, bouncing energy off each other, and going back and forth and deciding in the pre-production who is handling what responsibility for what characters and who's narrating. So they will alternate in the actual production. So one is called dual, one is called duet. And then multicasts, we can have multicast dual and multicast duet style. So we could have multicast where there might be just a multicast essentially just means there's more than 2 narrators. There's 3+ narrators on it. So if the multicast has 5 different POVs, in that dual style, each narrator will handle the different POV. If it's a duet, then you might have 5 or 6 people working at the same time on a particular project. So that's formatting. Casting is simple. Who's getting cast in those particular responsibilities? That's the production's responsibility to choose who's casting what. A lot of times the production company will work with the author to, if the author wants input on who's being cast and they are knowledgeable about audio, they can take part in that as well, depending on your production deal. And then it's the actual scheduling of the production, where most narrators that you hire now are going to have home studios. However, some don't. Or if an author is reading nonfic and they're reading their own material, the production company may have to find a studio that is appropriate for that particular person because it needs to be in their area and they can only travel 50 miles for some reason. That is our responsibility as producers. And then post-production. Post-production in audiobooks are 3 steps. Proofing, finding all the mistakes that were recorded that didn't mean to be recorded. We fix those. Editing, making sure the formatting of the actual sound files it matches what the distribution platform needs. say they want 3-second heads and 3-second tails on the files. We make sure that are the proper lengths in the editing process. And then mastering, making sure that we do things. Basically, mastering is 3 things, and we're not going to go into a lot of mastering talk because I'm not a tech guy, but it's EQing, limiting, and compressing. Those are essentially the 3 steps of making sure that the audio is what we call normalized, to make sure that it sounds great for the person's ear that's listening to it, and is also appropriate for that particular distribution platform's tech under their umbrella, under their hood of their car, so to speak. So those are the things we handle in production. When we're just producing, we will get, essentially, we'll handle all that responsibility for a certain cost. And then we give you what we call the masters, the mastered audiobook, the final audiobook that you will then decide wherever it's going to go for distribution. And then we're out. That's the production responsibility. When we publish, when you get with a publisher like myself, when you sign a deal with a publisher like our company, you are entrusting a company like us to be able to be partners with you on the marketing journey, on a 7 to 10 year journey, to make sure that this book is going to sell appropriately, and we're going to find the right listeners for that particular book. So it's a partnership for long-term success for your particular book. And so that means that we develop a marketing plan, an advertising plan, figure out what periodicals and what either magazines or newspapers are appropriate to advertise to. We talk about it's a PR effort and a PR machine that goes out and actually make sure that the news of the releases of these audiobooks gets out there to the right newspapers and periodicals and online platforms. And then it's the social media machine. It's making sure that we are taking advantage of all the social media platforms that are appropriate for your type of book. So, and then, the deals that we end up usually signing are, 7 to 10 year deals that are, that are royalty based. So you are going to, receive a certain royalty for each particular sale, as you do on your e-sales as well. And then that can vary depending if we're the level of a Dennis Lehane. That's going to be a 2 potential. That's going to be an advance with a lot of zeros. And then it's going to be, if a Dennis Lehane goes with a relatively independent company, that independent company is probably going to pay a very high royalty on top of that. And then there are some, it goes from that spectrum all the way to, you haven't done anything for your book yet. The book basically doesn't have much value yet. And we are using the audiobook in order to propel this book, the ebook and the paperback and the hardcover, all into a sales gathering mode. So we can utilize the audiobook in order to get that out into the market and rejuvenate everything that you've done or haven't done in the past for your particular for your book. So anything you want to add to that particular topic, Rob?
Well, I would just, so I'll ask you, I mean, when you're talking about publishing with Leonardo Audio, are you talking about ebook or audiobook or both?
Well, we're talking mainly audiobooks. We are an audiobook company, centrally an audiobook company for what we do. However, there are lots of situations where I'll explain one book we have coming out at the end of this month called The Rascal King. A guy named a wonderful gentleman by the name of Jack Beatty, who is a reporter for On Point and has been working with WBUR for a very long time. He wrote a book called The Rascal King about James Michael Curley, our very famous Boston politician from the turn of the century and the turn of the last century. And his book came out in 1992. And so this is the primary book that I remember getting when I got my political science degree from Boston College. Um, this is the book that I remember that taught me the most when I got my degree. So I really wanted to put this out in audio. There's no digital version of this book. So this is essentially it's a back title. So with a back title, when it comes to some of the um, audio platforms that we are going to be using as for distribution or for sales, you may have to get the book up as an EPUB to be able to attach to it. So, especially for projects that you are going with Audible as a distributor, and your marketplace, and we do that through something called ACX, which is the Audiobook Creation Exchange. If we are going with an exclusive deal, from that perspective, it is a requirement to have that book up as an EPUB, as a Kindle EPUB on their KDP system, on the Kindle Direct Publishing system. So you have to create an EPUB that is mistake free, and someone is capable of utilizing that for a good read. So we've gone through that process, and it's taken a minute, but now we're finally through it. And so for any back title that comes to us, we're going to have to go through that. So we are now we're an EPUB publisher as well, and we are working through those marketing plans to be able to find those readers as well as the listeners. But everything is built around, you know, building the entire IP of that book back up.
Right. So whether it's a back title that's been published or it's a title that hasn't been published, we can help bring that to
We
market.
certainly can,
Yes.
especially if it is not out. If it isn't out yet, it makes sense to couple them.
Right. Which, in fact, I went through that process with Leonardo Audio, with an adult novel that I wrote. Both the EPUB and audiobook came out through Leonardo.
What's that called? Off Strategy?
It's called Off Strategy, narrated by me. But that was, for me, it was great. That was the title that was optioned many years ago. It was gathering dust for me. Wasn't likely to be rejuvenated, come back to life with Sony. And I saw an opportunity to take a manuscript that I thought was really strong and bring it back to life through a small publisher that gave me a lot of attention. I got to be directed in reading this audiobook by Chris, which was hugely helpful, which probably wouldn't happen if it had been a major publisher. It would be a small fish in a very big pond.
Sure. So there's when you decide to publish instead of producing it, you have a long-term partner. And there are, especially on the audio side, because you could still handle, if you're educating yourself on EPUB releases and marketing releases with, say a Mark Dawson, or many of our internet educational bases for learning how to gather those EPUB sales. Audio is just completely different. It is a completely different revenue stream. So it's important to trust. To me, it's important to find a partner to help you do that. At least as a consultant, to help you, with all those choices that you're going to make in the second phase of this. There's a reason why when you have someone like me help on a particular project, you're not only getting the 450 books that I've rammed my head through, but there's also, there's the 15 years before that were in a lot of performance rooms as well. So and all the direction that happened before that. So it helps to find a partner. If it's not me, someone like me that has that type of particular skill set that will help on the important aspects of your project and see it and see the not only the micro vision, but not only the macro vision, but the micro vision as well.
Do you want to talk any more about the process of bringing an audiobook to market?
Well, when we bring an audiobook to market, there's certain things that we want to think about. When it comes to the genre that people are working in, each genre tends to have their own bay of listeners. So, in cultivating, your particular book or your particular series, it's important to do a little bit of homework on, what are the important things that that the audiobook listeners enjoy in your particular genre. Now, I'm not saying that you need to rewrite your book in order for the audio to translate these things, but every little bit helps, so that some of these things carry over from audio storytelling, um, from what's on the page, but some things are a little different. So, for instance, thinking about, in particular genres, there are some genres that want less attribution compared to more attribution to keep the story moving forward. Some listeners want a really grounded story, so they don't mind having your he said, she saids in there. But other genres want just pure action and pure dialogue. So it's important to do that research a little bit. But when it comes to bringing it literally to market, right? What's the biggest game in town? Biggest game in town is Audible. Audible is the monolith from 1969, Space Odyssey. You can't get away from it. It is it's the blob. They say that it has 50% of the digital sales numbers. They say it has a 50% share. I think it's more. I think it's technically more. Even when you compare it to all the other distribution platforms, I think it's more. So it means that there are choices along the way here. And I'm not talking about, you may think what you think about Amazon and Audible as a monolithic company, but then there's process and, where the listeners are getting their audiobooks. So we have choices along the way here. When it comes to Audible, knowing that they are the biggest game in town will tell you, that will help you decide how you want to utilize it. Do you want to utilize it right away in an exclusive manner? Or do you want to go non-exclusive and take advantage of all those other distribution platforms and go wide because you have a plan in order to make sure that you maximize that strategy? If libraries are part of your plan, then your plan is going to be wide, because Audible does not deal with libraries. They don't do any CD development. They don't do there's no digital connection when it comes to the Audible platform with libraries. But there are other platforms like Overdrive and Hoopla and Libby that deal directly with libraries. So those are just some things to think about when you bring your audiobook to market. Nowadays, when it comes to distribution platforms, right, they're probably about between 40 and 50, to be honest. And these numbers expand if you go outside of English-speaking countries. But there are probably 40 different platforms that we can utilize. There's Kobo under Walmart's umbrella. Barnes and Noble has their own. I mentioned Hoopla, Libby, and Overdrive as library platforms. There's Libro FM. So we have there's audiobooks.com. There's a good amount of these platforms that are out there to choose from. But now what we have is we have these distribution management companies that you can go to, and they will handle your wide distribution, the Findaways of the world, the Authors Republics of the world. Also, Dreamscape Select is another. Blackstone is a very popular independent audiobook company in our industry that has actually spun back to doing brick and mortar. So they are doing hardcover and paperback a lot, but they also have their own distribution platform called Downpour. But then they also handle distribution to all the other platforms if you choose to choose them for that purpose. So that's why it's important to at least go to a consultant to figure out, okay, which one of these companies has the appropriate plan that I'm looking that will maximize my particular book in this particular genre. And each one is going to have varying percentages on your royalties that you're going to get. So you're going to look at all those percentages and decide, okay, I'm going to go with this particular company or this particular company in order to handle all that. And then that company will give you sales reports either quarterly or twice a year on all your sales numbers. So anything else on that, Rob?
No, I think that was pretty good. I do want to make sure we talk a little bit about talent,
Okay.
because I think that's something that a lot of authors are really interested in. Who's going to bring my book to life? Who's that voice going to be? Can we all get Morgan Freeman to read our books? What are the things to look for if you are an author being involved in casting decisions? What are the benefits? I mean, I can say that, one of the interesting things when you have an audiobook, suddenly not only do you as an author potentially have a following and have people that will buy your book, but if you select a narrator, with a following, who might be well known for reading romance or reading thrillers, you might make sales based on the strength of that narrator, right? People will look on Audible for the books that Chris Ciulla narrates, and they might find your book because he's narrating your book. Or in theory, that could be the case with Rob Vlock. Theoretically, probably not, but just because I'm fairly new as a narrator. So I don't have a following yet. What else do authors need to know about talent? I think that's like probably the thing that keeps people up at night. Like, what if the narrator doesn't sound like I think they're going to sound?
Yeah.
Or
So
how do I
let
find them to
me
sound like it?
let me preface it by saying this: like, if people here have done a little research on self-publishing their own book as an audiobook, they've probably figured out some things about ACX, the Audiobook Creation Exchange, right? And my warning to them is that's the Wild West of audiobooks. So by that, you put your book up on that site, you're able to put some audiobook text, audiobook copy up there, and you'll get 5-minute auditions back from people. But when you go to a site like that and basically put an opportunity out to Gen Pop, you are at risk of getting someone who is good at auditioning, but not a very good storyteller. Has never proven themselves as like having career defining longevity in their storytelling experiences as a narrator. So it's very risky to just jump into that. Now, so that's my suggestion, is to work with a production company at least. So you don't have to, if you are someone who wants to have as much involvement as you can and care about the audio and are a listener, then it makes sense that you're involved in the casting, you're involved a little bit in the production. But to hire a production company that handles this is gonna allow you to, one, save a lot of time, but also to avoid the riffraff. So that the first time you're doing this, you're doing it the right way. So what we do is we'll gather 3 to 5 choices that are really good choices for this particular book. And we will set up, a list of their web assets. So you'll hear their demos. You will look at their website. You'll see a list of their awards and their accolades. From that, if you still don't know what you want, then we can take auditions. But it's a much smaller group, 5 max, not 150, not 275, which now you've gone yourself. And remember, in 275 auditions you get, number 34 might really be the best one in there. And you might just miss it
Mhm.
because it's too overwhelming.
And that's the quantity you would get if you go to ACX and just
Yes.
put out a general open casting call for your book.
Yes. And it's just too much. It does, that's why it makes sense. Your time is money. So if you went down that road, and there are 15 different things that you can screw up down that road, unfortunately. A company like ours makes sure that that doesn't happen. And then, but the important thing is, whoever you hire, but that is industry centric and really knows what they're doing. Once you ask for your character specs, your narrator specs, if you know what you're looking for, we're going to find it very easily for you, because we're going to have a roster of talent that, has let us know what they're all about if we haven't worked with them directly in the past. So it cuts down on a lot of that, the messiness of going through things 3, 4, 5 times, where, let us go through that stuff for you. You don't have to experience that. Did I answer that question?
I think so. I think so. I have a related question I'm going to throw out there, but I do want to mention to everyone that's listening, please utilize the Q&A function on this. We're going to open it up to Q&A pretty soon. I know that Marjorie is going to help us out with that shortly, but we can talk all night, but we'd really rather speak to things that concern all of you. And the only way we can do that is through the Q&A function. So please type in your questions and we will do our best to answer them. Chris, what I would love to talk about a little bit of what the things any author can do to sort of help prepare their book for audio production. I assume you don't want to see an author just throw a manuscript over the transom and say, here you go, make this into an audiobook for me, right? Author involvement's important to get the best product.
Absolutely. So we have a book questionnaire that is really specific and very detailed as far as for what we're looking to gather, not only for ourselves as project managers and production managers, but for the narrators who will not only be auditioning, but then will be narrating the actual product. So the actual title. So we will have, what's the thought process? One of the most important things to know, like right off the bat, is, okay, is this a one-off or is it a series? And we're going to handle those two particular situations very differently. If it's a series, then we've got to know some of the things about these characters as they develop in the series. Like, does our lead survive? Does the lead that we have in book 1, is he or she the lead in book 4? Or does that ancillary character that has 2 lines at the end of book 1 end up the hero in book 4? And so those kind of situations help us and help the narrator, who is going to be an experienced storyteller, handle that character the right way. Not to lean in too much, but to lean in just enough to know, okay, we're giving what the listener should know at this moment in time, or not. We're handling it the right way. Also, in nonfiction, we like to gather as much information about the author as possible. If the author does not want to narrate their own stuff, which a lot of times they don't, it's not that their skill set. That's not what, even if the author, I would only say that authors who are podcasting, who do TED Talks, who are out there with their own material, then it's fine to narrate your own stuff. But if it's a skill set that you do not have, then I say you're better off finding a narrator that has actually a lesser skill set, but something close to what you are skilled at. Whatever the 3 degrees that you have, we can find a narrator that has at least one. And, then they fall nicely into your shoes and have those parallels that are necessary to be able to translate that copy really efficiently.
Yeah, I'll say that probably, well, definitely the only time I have ever changed the speed setting on an audiobook was when an author who was a very well-known nonfiction author, I will not mention any names, narrated his or her, I'm going to be as general as I can here, book, and it was almost unlistenable, but the content was fantastic. I nearly put the book down virtually, because it, of course, was just in my ears, nearly took the book out of my ears. And it was a bad choice. It was a wonderful book. And if I had read it, I would have loved it. I almost didn't get the content because it was a bad choice of narrator in that case. The author wanted to narrate his own. It was not his strength. A brilliant writer, not a good narrator. So it's something to think about. It's not as easy. This is something that I learned getting into this business. I figured, hey, I read my stuff all the time. I'm reading, to whole schools full of hundreds of kids. Surely I'm good at it. And I learned very quickly that I had to develop skills to allow me to be a good narrator. And I'm still coaching and learning and building those muscles so I can be effective. It's something that, as an author, sometimes you think, well, look, I know my book better than anyone. So who's better than me to read it? And I learned, I did read one of my books. I would not read my middle grade books myself. I would want someone else to do it. I just don't think I'd do justice to it. It's not fair to my characters, to the work I put in the book, to do it myself. So casting, finding the right talent is hugely important. And it's not always the author. In fact, usually isn't.
But just to go back to the original question about the book questionnaire, and then we'll go we'll finish up with the audiobook cost.
Yep.
When you work with a reputable production company and or publisher, they're going to ask for you to fill out a book questionnaire. And so that will be the nice guide that at every level of this, it will, from pre-production to post-production, they will have that as the outline for all the things that we're looking for. And it will help answer a lot of questions so that when we do get to the point where potentially the narrator is chatting with you directly to get some of information on your choices as to the why sometimes, it'll be really specific. They'll, because all the general stuff is already out there. And so just to give you some general ideas on what audiobooks cost, okay? There's a little bit of a range. However, if you are going to use union talent for your projects, I personally am Leonardo Audio, our company, is a union signatory now, which means we are, have to give the narrators a particular rate. It's not huge, but it is a certain rate that we have to pay. So if you're going to be utilizing union talent, most likely your production is going to be at least 290 per finished hour. So 300 is a good guide for the floor of what an audiobook costs. Now that means your essential costs are for the narrator and then for post-production. And post-production costs are usually between $75 and $125 per finished hour. And per finished hour is the cost that is the type of is the term that we use that people are being paid for in audiobooks. So for instance, that rate, if a book is 10 hours long, the actual production cost of that book is 10 times your per finished hour rate. So an average book is going to be 10 times $300. And that's so 3,000 is what you're looking for on the floor for a production with a professional narrator for a 10-hour book.
I'm going to take advantage of your pause, and we have some good questions.
Very good.
And I agree. I mean, I could listen to you all night. I am an audiobook. I love audiobooks. I've been listening to them for over 30 years. So I'm entranced by what you guys are talking about. So here are, yes, 2 questioners with 3 questions. So the first question comes out of personal experience. I'm not going to, we're sort of running a little short on time. But it's from one of our members who talks about an experience that she had reading a book, and comes to the question, how do you find talent? She did some book recording and loved it and thought it would be a terrific, quote, job for a writer. So her first question is, how do you find talent?
Yeah. So this is the thing. As far as for people, a lot of times use ACX in order to find that talent, right? But what I'm saying is you should connect with a production company, at least to aggregate the good talent that's going to be available for your particular book. So you could even hire production just for casting. And so in order to, because if you're not, ACX has been created so that, yes, you can do that. You can find talent there and create your deal there and use that as the method, as the delivery method to get it to Audible. That, like, ACX is essentially a delivery site. It's a QC site and a delivery site for the tech to get onto Audible. However, again, it's the Wild West. There's just the numbers are of inexperienced people. There's just too many. So I would say, if you're a listener, a good way to find good narrators is to check out Audiophile magazine. Look at Audiophile. They're online and they are, a paper distribution. That's where all the good narrators are being reviewed.
And it's audiophile with an F, by the way, not a PH. So audio, FILE, magazine.com. Sorry to interrupt, Chris.
That's where, they are the industry pillar. They are the one mainstay as a magazine in the audiobook realm. And so they are, and they have their own audiophile listings for working narrators. So you could scroll through that like you would scroll through ACX, but now you're getting reputable talent that has potentially earphone awards that are a step above everything you're going to find on ACX. So if for someone who doesn't want to spend money, okay, do that. Find whatever it costs to get access. It may cost nothing. but whatever to get access to audiophiles list of narrators, that's the best way to do it.
Right. And I would add that a lot of people who are being written up regularly in audiophile are not auditioning for things on ACX. ACX does tend to have a group of less experienced narrators. Once you reach a certain point in your career, I think people tend to eschew ACX and work directly with production companies or publishers.
Yeah, we use ACX. So myself as a narrator. Now, obviously, everything is under Leonardo Audio as a production company, but as a narrator, I pick my spots on projects that I'll grab outside authors to work with, and then we'll use ACX when we choose to use it. I'm not on ACX looking for gigs.
Right. And not to find talent, you would use it as a platform as a delivery system,
As a tool, as a delivery tool.
as a tool, but not to find talent.
Nope.
So these are sort of related questions. It's kind of, I think it's a little bit embedded in the first question, but I'm going to move on to the second question, or if I have time to come back, I will. But so the second questioner is a nonfiction writer who wants to narrate his own books. And his question is, and this was one of my questions, on the artistic side, how do I learn the skill set of an audiobook narration? And then he asks another question, so I'm going to tuck into this one. How do you develop those narration skills? Just by doing it a lot, taking courses, finding a coach, and then going back on the business side. If he were a narrator, how does he convince a publisher that he's the right person for the job? So that's a bunch of questions packed in there, but a lot of it is sort of, how would I become talent? How does somebody become talent?
Yeah. So I'm a coach. I'm a prolific coach. This is what I mean, this is what I do a lot. And so I've developed people from the very beginning of what they're, even if they've never listened to an audiobook before, even if they're an audiobook listener but have never acted before. I've made these people into working audiobook narrators. I've helped them activate their own things within themselves to know that, okay, as a person, I have certain experiences that I've been able to utilize, and that I can now utilize, and I can learn how to bring them back up. And then, along the way, we teach you what you should be accessing at certain points, because there are certain levels of buyers in our industry. There are the ACXs of the world, and then there are independent independent producers, and then there are independent publishers, and then there are large indie publishers that are, large APA companies, Audio Publishers Association companies, and then there's the big five. So there's this long strip of buyers that you will learn which ones to go to when. And then you learn what you should be doing as far as for the demos, as far as for your samples, what genres and subgenres should you be attacking at the beginning of your career? Which ones are you well built to perform right now, and which ones, even though you want to narrate them later, which ones should you be developing the skill set to narrate now while you're narrating the other stuff, while you're narrating the other stuff now? So you develop one skill set for later while you're working on stuff now that you can work on. And usually that's nonfic. Like the nonfic stuff, you'll figure out a way to do it, because it'll start to translate to you, not easier, but especially if it's your own stuff, you'll be able to narrate that stuff eventually because it's your voice, and we'll figure out how to get it. But then if it's fiction stuff you want to work on, you're just working in order to build that skill set for later. We have workouts for people who don't even want to go into class. Say you just want to work on copy. We run workouts for audiobooks once a week for inexpensive charges. So you can get a 15-minute segment of time, or myself or two other resident coaches on staff will coach you and give you notes and get you on the right track to having that be a wonderful listening experience for a potential audiobook listener / Audible customer?
So
Yes.
Rob can
Go ahead.
jump in there.
Yeah, I'll jump in really quickly because I just went through this. So that question, which is boiled down, one of the Q&As in there says, isn't the question meant to be, how do I become a narrator? It is. And I just went through that, and coaching is really important. There are different, ways you can coach. As Chris mentioned, we have workouts. These are just slots of time, 15-minute slots where you bring a 3-minute script to read and you get coached on it. And it's a great way to dip your toe in the water, but one-on-one coaching is really important. You can also do classes as well. I got my start with a class that Chris taught. I've coached with Chris directly, but I've also coached with a bunch of other narrators, coaches, and it's helpful. Chris is wonderful, but it's helpful to get a lot of different perspectives on things from different coaches. Different coaches will bring out different things in you. You probably have those skills buried within you. Writers in particular have, they're creative, and there's a lot of creativity that has to be brought to bear in narration. Writers have that. Writers understand text, they understand books, so they tend to be, with the right training, good narrators. So yes, you get coaching, you get a lot of coaching. You listen a lot. That's a huge part of becoming a narrator, is listening and understanding what's good and what's bad. So if you're not listening to audiobooks now, you absolutely should, especially if you want to become a narrator.
that's terrific. So you've
And
also put
And Leonardo, they'll find that stuff on leonardoaudio.com.
It's just what I was going to say. That's great. You put your website in the chat. We're technically out of time, but I want to be fair. I'm going to come back to one question. If people need to leave, they can leave, and then I'll wrap up. But the other question was, this is more specific. Somebody published, the first questioner has published a memoir, paperback and ebook 9 years ago, and she doesn't want it to die. Is it too late to do an audiobook?
Not at all, because it will reinvigorate the actual other sales.
Yeah.
So that's the way we look at audiobooks. Everyone has to look at an audiobook like that. You've got to look at, okay, audiobooks is one revenue stream, but then it's going to enable the marketing to kick in for your other revenue streams, for your ebook and potentially your paperback and hard copies. So we have been working, nonstop for about 18 months trying to develop ways to do this in order to reinvigorate sales for all your and potentially other books within your library. I mean, this is, so I would totally go after it.
And that's exactly what we're doing with The Rascal King, which was originally published in 1992.
Yeah.
So much older than the book that we're talking about here. So I think it's never too late. I do notice that in the Q&A, there is a question about direction.
Sure.
I don't mean to step on any toes, Marjorie.
No,
If you
no.
want to read it, but someone has written.
I'm both watching time and wanting everybody to have a chance.
Once we have the talent who directs them, making sure they're making the right choice for the book. And most books are self-directed by the narrator. Not always. There are directed sessions, but because the directed sessions take the time of whoever's directing it, and since so many narrators have their home studios, they're self-directed, which just makes it that much more important to make sure you get the right talent, because you can't necessarily count on someone like Chris, who again directed me narrating my own book. The narrator has to know what they're doing. And you as an author don't always have a ton of contact with that author. If you're lucky, you can get some, the author doesn't have a lot of contact with the narrator. If you're lucky, you can get a little bit, and certainly that input form that we use will give the narrator a lot of information. But professional narrators will typically self-direct.
And if you want to hire a directors on the low end are you could get a director for $60 a studio hour, but they're between usually $80 and $120 per studio hour.
Which is
So-
different than per finished hour,
Yeah,
right?
so we're talking that's real time in a studio. That's just a regular work day. So if your book is 10 hours long, and the usual ratio of someone who is experienced is 2 to 1. So if you get a really experienced narrator, you're talking on a 10-hour book, it's 20 hours of studio time.
Mhm.
So you've added $2,000 to your budget if you go with the director. Now, there's some situations where, say, it's coming under our company umbrella, we'll roll that into a package somehow. So, for instance, we just got the rights to a self-help book that we're doing, to a relatively newer author, but we like the idea. So we're rolling the direction. I'll be directing her, and it's rolled into our package.
This has just been, I mean, this both as a writer and an audiobook lover, this has been fantastic. I am going to wind us up, even though I think we could go on forever and ever and ever. But you've got your website in there, which is Leonardo.
Margaret, can I just mention?
Sure.
So we have an email circular that goes out.
Okay.
So on our website, Leonardo Audio, there is on the About Us page, at the bottom of the About Us page, people can join our email list on the bottom right. So they just have to fill that out, and then there'll be an email will be going out tomorrow regarding a workout that we're doing this week. So if people are interested in auditing that, that might be an email that they don't want to miss. And then we're on all the social media platforms. We're on Twitter, Leonardo Audio. We're on Instagram, we're Leonardo Audiobooks. And then on Facebook, we have our own workout group, Leonardo Audio Workout Group. You can pop onto that, and that's an easy way to figure out some of the stuff and some of the not only the workshops and workouts, but the titles that we're releasing.
This has been wonderful. I wish we had a whole other hour. Yes, anyway, but we do have to wind up. And since you have that, people will check out that website for sure. I certainly will. And so I want to thank you, Chris and Rob, for all of the information and insights into audiobook publishing, and both the production one and the library ones, which I'm particularly fond of, but that there's such a range. And thank you to everybody who joined us. And a special thanks to Leslie Ostro, who is the Writers' Room Program Director, and she has been our technology maven tonight. This is a new series, so we're still lining up people to be interviewed, and we're going to send out announcements and post it on Facebook and Instagram. We'll probably start up in the fall, give us time to really pull this together. But we'll announce on the website, Facebook, and Instagram the date and topic of the next interview, again, either later in the summer or earlier in the fall. And meanwhile, sort of all the other announcements, including the readings, will be found on the website. We do have another reading coming up actually next week. We have a reading and then another reading in July, and then we take August off. So good night, everybody. And thank you so much, interviewees and listeners and everybody who joined us and everybody who will be listening to this. So that's it. I'm going to take us off, but thank you so much. And good night, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Good night.